The Alias podcast.
And we're back, and this time we're doing a double duty. This is episode 9, and it's gonna be coming out the same time as episode 8. For episode 8 was primarily catching up on the games that I had played, but now we're gonna focus on the other end of things, the other stuff that Alias covers. That is the movies and TV shows and music that have been kind of surfacing and been in the community for the past month and a half or so. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start off with the movies and then find my way back around to the one TV show I've been watching and the one album I wanted to talk about. So let's talk about movies. We're going to start off with The Lighthouse. Now, going into this film, I was excited because Robert Edgar and Ari Aster, they've been they've been leading the forefront of A24 with their horror films that they've been putting out. And I wasn't the biggest fan of The Witch, and I thought that I thought Midsummer was kind of a misfire for Ari Aster, but I thought Hereditary was probably the best movie of last year. I absolutely loved that film. Probably one of the best, if not the best, horror film I've ever seen. And Robert Pattinson, he's kind of been making a comeback of sorts. He started Good Time a year or two back, and I saw that pretty recently. I thought that was fantastic. I thought really high energy from the Safdie brothers, and what Robert Pattinson brought to that film was really great. And I know he's going to be in Christopher Nolan's film next year called Tenet, so he's been doing a lot of great things recently. So, and I heard a lot of good stuff about Willem Dafoe's role in this film, so I was very excited to see this film. And this film really was fantastic. It really blew me away. Just if you don't know what it's about two lighthouse keepers, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson's characters, and they're isolated on this island. And the whole film is pretty much their just descent into madness and insanity. Specifically, Robert Pattinson's, he's really the main character of the film, and he's really I think he's pretty much in every scene or every shot of the film. He really is the driving force of this film, and both of these guys, they give best of their career, top of the line, amazing acting. Both of these guys should be nominated for supporting actor for Willem Dafoe and best actor for Robert Pattinson. Because my God, these guys, these are powerhouse performances. This is really next level stuff, and this whole movie is just a visual and auditory, just overload of just insanity. Just what's going on with these characters is absolutely wild. It's super crazy, and you really have to just see this movie to go on this crazy ride. That it really is crazy, in the literal sense, crazy ride, where you get to see these characters' downfall, and where they go from the start to where they are at the end. It's just absolutely insane. And everything about this film, the cinematography, the audio, the acting is all A+, top of the line stuff. And I would give this movie, in the high 9s, if it weren't for one thing, and that's that this movie follows a blueprint that Ari Aster and Robert Eggers have kind of been following with the past movies. I kind of joked around with my friend who'd saw this movie before that this was gonna the movie's gonna be like this, and then this is gonna happen at the very end. And I shit you not, I saw them film, and literally what I guessed was gonna happen by the end of the film is exactly what had happened. And that's, I think, the one knock that this film takes is if you've seen movies like this before in the past couple of years, then where this film is going to end up at the end of it, by the end of the road. But still, I think, even though I kind of knew where things were going to go, because, it's kind of almost a given, I feel like, with the way the story was playing out throughout, there's some amazing craftsmanship that's going on. Robert Eggers is really bringing the best that he possibly can, and there's just this feeling of isolation that this film brings is just disturbing. The events that occur in this film are just disturbing. This film will be on your mind for days, weeks to come after you've walked out of it. And this film, I'll say, has probably my favorite shot of this entire year. Involves Robert Pattinson coming across something horrific and just running away and kind of just screaming, but there's no sound, or you can't hear him screaming. But I love that shot. When you see that in the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I absolutely love this film. One of my favorites of the year. It's definitely going to be in contention for film of the year. And the only thing that brings it down is that it does follow a blueprint. I think that movies that A24 has been doing the past few years, horror films, it kind of follows that same blueprint. But otherwise, I absolutely love this film. And that's just kind of a nitpick that comes with my viewing experience. And maybe if you take this movie isolated and just view it for what it is and try to ignore these other movies, I don't really have any flaws besides that. It's kind of an external flaw that comes with this film and its companions that join it with the A24 films. But I'm going to go ahead and give this film a 9.2 out of 10. I think it is an amazing piece of film. And I feel like the Academy is going to kind of look over this film because they're not really big on horror films, but they got it. If they want to do the right thing, this film's going to be nominated all across the board. This film is fantastic. Moving on to the next film, though. I thought this next film was an A24 film, but it's not. I was wrong. It is Parasite. Now, I forgot what the director's name is, sadly, but I know he did direct Snowpiercer, and he has directed The Host. I haven't actually seen Snowpiercer. I want to get around to seeing it one day, but I have seen The Host, and The Host is one of my favorite movies. Probably a top 25 movies, even though it is a foreign film. That doesn't mean it's bad. It might have a little barrier of entry for some people who maybe aren't into reading subtitles, but if you can get over that, the films that this director brings to screens, is the stories that he presents are amazing. The Host was an absolutely fantastic film, and it was a monster film, but it was more about the sorrows and the tribulations and the reactions that people have to deal with, and a family. It's about a family coming together, and that idea of family is something that carries over to this film. It's funny. The last movie I saw of his was called The Host, and this film is called Parasite. But pretty much the general idea of this film involves two families: a rich family and a poor family. And I think this film's set in South Korea. Pretty much this poor family, they need to get jobs, and the brother of the oldest son in the family, he's able to get a job from his friend tutoring a rich and more like a higher class family, and they're pretty much conning. The whole story of the film is they pretty much con the rich family into getting everyone in the poor family jobs, but no one in the rich family knows that all their workers are in the same family or are related. And the events transpiring that get everyone those jobs, and what happens after they're all in this house working together, it leads into a really, really interesting story. And seeing where this whole story plays out is super fascinating. And this wouldn't be as engaging as it was if the characters weren't as fleshed out as they are. Everyone in this family, or everyone in this film, has a really fleshed out personality. They've got something about them that you can pinpoint about them and really draw them out, and you really want to see where these characters' arcs are going on both families' ends. And the families aren't stupid. The rich family isn't stupid. They're smart. Both families are smart, and it creates these really high intensity situations I can't really go into without spoiling that. But I enjoyed this movie, and I think this film is one with almost pretty much no flaws. The only flaw that I could potentially have is maybe near the end. There's some events that transpired that maybe a certain character's motivations or actions that occurred, the motivations behind it aren't the easiest to understand. But the characters at hand and everything that's going on. The cinematography isn't the most flashy, but this is just a story that your eyes will just be glued to, for the entire runtime. This film, though, I do want to talk about spoilers. So I'm going to go ahead and give this film a 9.5 out of 10 because I don't really have that many issues with it. But I thought it was fantastic. I pretty much have no issues except the small one I pointed at the end. But now we're going to go into spoilers and talk about what that issue is specifically. So with this film, so now we're going to spoiler territory. At the very end, when things are going to shit and that guy's coming out and he's stabbing people, the only issue I had, it was a little confusing why exactly the dad in the poor family went ahead and stabbed the dad in the rich family. It's not the most clear. You can eventually draw conclusions to it if you think about it, but it just kind of felt really random. But I love that the dynamic, that the class separation, the rich and the poor, especially at the end when everything's going to shit. The rich family isn't even trying to help the girl that's been stabbed, and when he even pushes that guy over that tried to attack him, he's just trying to grab his keys. But I thought it was, all the characters I thought were superb, and you really cared about them and the plights that they're going through. So I absolutely loved this film. Also one of the best of the year. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and move right on. Now, this next movie was an extremely anticipated release. Really shocked that it came to Netflix. It was pretty much a Netflix film, and it's something that I was super excited about, really excited about to end up watching. Sadly, I do feel like it is probably the weakest of the 3 movies that I have seen or I'm reviewing in this episode this fall, and that is The Irishman. Now, I am a huge Scorsese fan. Absolutely love the guy. One of my favorite directors. Has an almost flawless track record. Even his weakest movies are still really good films, in my opinion. But this movie is kind of, I'm sure for a fact he's making movies after this. I think his next movie is going to have Leonardo DiCaprio again. But this is supposed to be kind of like a nice, coming together party of Martin Scorsese. You got Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci. And even though this is, I think, Al Pacino's first time working with Scorsese, those 2 actors have been very prominent and have played important roles in Scorsese's career. But, I think once all said and done, taking the hype away, I think this is actually probably Scorsese's weakest film this decade. And I know that's a very controversial opinion, and I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me who have seen this movie. But let me try to explain, I guess. So let me just go into what this film is about. It's about Frank Sheeran, the Irishman, played by Robert De Niro. It's pretty much the span of his life, and how he connects with other mafia members, specifically Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah, Jimmy Hoffa, who plays Al Pacino, and their relationship. And, it's pretty much his entire life story, or his adulthood story, up until he's a really old man. And the story plays out as him recollecting his life and explaining it to the viewer. He plays the Irishman, Robert De Niro. And then, as I said, Al Pacino plays Jimmy Hoffa. And then Joe Pesci plays Russ Buffalino, I believe that's what his name is. And let's go into the pros of this film. Pros: the acting, fantastic. The vibe that this film portrays, fantastic. It makes you feel like you're in that era. When these actors are acting, it doesn't feel like they're acting. It feels like you're almost watching a biography. It feels like you're just, watching these people be people and watching these stories play out. I think the arcs, specifically of Robert De Niro's character, all the character arcs that are in the story are very fleshed out and almost to a detriment too fleshed out. But I think those are all very important things to nail down, and I think that what Scorsese did there was the most important part, and he did get that down very well. Going into the cons, though, I think this film's runtime is a negative. A lot has been said about this film's 3.5 hour runtime. This is probably, Scorsese films are always this long. I mean, let me just look it up. I know Wolf of Wall Street's 3 hours. I'm curious how long Silence is. Let me check. Silence runtime. That is 2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours and 41 minutes. And then I remember one more. Shutter Island. How long was that? Shutter Island was 2 hours 20. But yeah, that was the shortest. But Irishman, I think this is Scorsese's longest film. One of the longest films of this millennia, these past 2 decades so far. But like I was saying, the runtime, I think, is a huge detriment to this film. I think this film meanders a little too long for its first half of its runtime. I understand it's trying to set things up and get things in motion, but what the film's trying to get to and what it's trying to get across, it starts taking place in the second half. The main plot point, the main story, main arc it's trying to convey, especially the last 30 minutes, the last hour, last 30 minutes or so, everything starts coming together in a nice bow. But and I can say that by the end of the film, everything comes together and it feels like one complete story. But I can't take away from the fact that the first, half of this film, this film drags. It definitely drags. And, artistically, it does come together by the end. But, it makes you question how much of the story could have been left on the cutting room floor, how much it was really necessary. I feel like there's a lot of fat in the story. And this film feels like a full epic, with the amount of characters and amount of plot that's going on. But sometimes that can get kind of confusing. You don't really, there's so much going on and so much to keep track of in terms of characters and motivations. You sometimes start to lose the picture with what exactly is happening. There's so many stories that this movie bounces between, so many small individual 5-minute stories to arcs that span the entire film, and you begin to lose the idea, where are we going with this. I think that's kind of this film's main detriment. And one film that this film actually kind of reminds me of, but I think this is a much better film than the one I'm about to mention, is Foxcatcher. Foxcatcher is about like an Olympic wrestling team, and they're it's kind of leading. The whole film is about kind of leading towards a certain event that's supposed to culminate in the arc of all the characters involved. But and that's kind of the same thing with this film. There's an event that this film is trying to get to, and everything that comes before it is supposed to be this build-up, this culmination of everyone's stories coming together and finally reaching to this point. But I think maybe the road getting there, it just isn't as as strong as it should be. I think it's the same thing with Wolf of Wall Street. Not maybe in it being the weak aspect, but there's a lot of build up in Wolf of Wall Street for the first hour and a half, 2 hours, which is what makes the last hour come together. Because everything that comes together in the last hour is a culmination of what came in the first 2 hours. But I think what's lacking here is, Wolf of Wall Street had a really strong sense of forward momentum and energy throughout it. Even with Silence, I think Silence, in comparison to The Irishman, Silence was, about one character's, harrowing journey through, these really tough experiences. So you're with him and you're really pinned in on him. And you don't have to worry about all these political, there are political things that are going on in that film, but you don't have to worry about, this huge handful of characters and getting confused about where exactly the plot is going. And, I think also Scorsese has handled an ensemble cast much cleaner, with films like The Departed, where he showed that he can have a mob film involving a huge amount of characters, but still have a story, a follow through, a thread line that makes sense and you can follow and you can really grasp pretty well. And I think that's the biggest problem with this film at the end, is it drags because it lacks that intensity I think that the Irishman, the titular Irishman, is not the greatest character. I think that's partly in the fact that these are all real people, and this is telling a true story. But so there's only so much that you can do with someone that already exists. But I think that Robert De Niro's character just isn't as interesting as I want him to be. He's not as interesting as Jordan Belfort. He's not as interesting as the characters in The Departed. He's not as interesting. You're not as emotionally connected with the struggles that he's going through as Andrew Garfield's character in Silence. So that's kind of where it comes down to me. I think that there's a lot of good things that are being done, and I think how the film wraps up is pretty powerful. But I feel like a lot of what Scorsese's doing here, the themes and what's going on, he's done somewhere else, and he's done better. So in the end, I'm going to go ahead and give this film an 8 out of 10. I think it's a great film. I think there's a lot of great things that happen with it. I think the way the story wraps up and how everything comes together is great, but I think it's not done as tightly as it could have been. And I think it's a little too indulgent in itself with its 3.5 hour runtime. So yeah, that's The Irishman. Kind of a letdown, but still a great movie, I think. Now, those were all the movies that I had seen recently, but one show that I kind of wanted to talk about for a little bit, because something I didn't expect to watch, but here we are watching it. Disney Plus came out, huge success. I think it's a great streaming service, much better than Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is hot trash, in my opinion. Don't pay $5 a month for it when you can pay $7 a month for something like Disney Plus. But I watched the Mandalorian, the new Star Wars TV show. Yeah, it's kind of getting headlines everywhere because of spoilers, but I feel like it's not really spoilers here. Baby Yoda's character. And I've been really enjoying the show, but there are kind of issues that I have with it as a whole, and I just want to give my quick thoughts on it. I'm not going to give a full rating on it, but it just feels like almost Star Wars and The Last of Us had a kid. I feel like the storyline has been very present in a lot of popular video games lately, over this decade at least, with the character watching over a younger character and bonding, that sort of bonding. And I joked, there's a lot of similar themes and events that are occurring throughout the Mandalorian that happened in The Last of Us. It's kind of funny. I think this show's biggest pro, and this whole era of Star Wars' pro, is that feels very disconnected from what's going on in the Skywalker saga. I think that's a positive. I think that Star Wars has been going on for 50 years now, and I think we really need to start pushing away from the Skywalker saga. I think this universe is so rich and there's so much you can draw from it that we don't need to have movies centered so much around the Skywalker saga. Yeah, maybe you can use certain events as bouncing off points, but I think you can tell much smaller scale, individual stories, and do it really well, and people will be invested. And I think The Mandalorian has been a good showcase for that. I think people are liking the show a lot, and I'm enjoying the show. It's been an entertaining ride, but I think it has some issues, and I think they can improve it a lot. I think the show has a lot of potential, but it needs to do a few things, and it needs to tweak things around a little. I think if they really want to take it to the next level. So specifically, I want to talk about the runtime of the shows. I think that's been a big detriment. Most of the episodes have been between 30 to 40 minutes long. The most recent one has been 41 minutes. And maybe this is because I just came off of something like Game of Thrones. But I feel like any TV show I've watched, the episodes are very cookie cutter and very simple. You can usually describe what's going to happen, what is going to happen, what happens in a certain episode in a sentence or two. And I think there's a lot of events transpiring in these episodes that could probably be drawn out, and be half season or even entire season arcs. Specifically, like in episode 4, there's, he lands on this planet and he spends time in this village. I feel like the bonds and, interactions with these characters could have been fleshed out at least in multiple episodes. they definitely could have had multiple episodes, and definitely the fight that happens at the end could have been the culmination of a big saga or a big arc regarding this village that he's in. But he lands on this planet and leaves in the same exact episode, and it makes it so there's not that much weight being held to a lot of what's occurring. His interactions with Baby Yoda, I feel like it doesn't feel as earned as it should be when he goes and saves him in episode 3. I feel like, if you let their relationship play out across a few more episodes, that could have been the season finale, the big season finale episode where he saves Baby Yoda. But yeah, those are kind of like, I'm liking the show, but I feel like a lot of what's going on doesn't hold much weight and isn't as important as it should be, because they're moving through a lot of it. I'm sure they have a blueprint, so that's probably why they're getting through things at a really fast pace. But I think there needs to be like a B plot. There needs to be kind of more things going on in each episode and draw that episode length out, so you can have more, viewers can care about these characters more and feel their connections and their interactions with each other. So I'm enjoying The Mandalorian. I'm excited to see where it goes, but I feel like these probably issues won't be fleshed out until future seasons. So yeah, that's it for the TV shows. Now there is one album I want to briefly cover, and that is Jesus is King by the one and only Kanye West. Now, I was interested for this album. I'm not a Christian, but he was making a gospel album. I was curious to see where he would go with it. He's made gospel-esque music before, even if it hasn't been full-on gospel. But Kanye has always been a trendsetter. He's always been pushing forward with the industry. I remember I had to write a final paper in early on in college about Kanye West. It was my longest paper because I had so much to talk about what he does with each one of his releases and how he's able to set a standard and maybe of sound or maybe of a release strategy with all of his albums that have been coming out. However, I think this is the very first time where Kanye has put out an album and it hasn't done anything for the industry, and I don't think it's done anything for him. I think this album was a total misfire, and let me go into it. So Kanye has been a not great, honestly kind of bad rapper lately, from Ye until now. His rapping has not been great. He had some really good rapping on Life of Pablo, so it's strange to see this very large decrease in quality. And I was kind of expecting that, his vocal performances. He really comes together now, I think nowadays, best as a curator, as a producer, being able to put people together and things like that. But I think when he has to get on the mic, he's not great with it. And I think that carries on here too. There's some really bad lines, really laughable lines on this album. Like, the whole closed on Sunday thing like that. I was laughing when I heard that. It was really bad. But I think the production on this album is really good. I think it's interesting. It keeps things interesting when the lyrical performances are very below average throughout. I also think this album just feels kind of undercooked. It's only 28 minutes out of 11 songs. A lot of songs have trouble reaching the 2.5 minute mark, I think. Barely any songs that go over 3 minutes. And it makes it feel like that there's a lot of ideas that aren't totally fleshed out in these songs. And I think the biggest thing that's kind of been irking me about this album is the fact that there is a Yandhi leak, which is what this album I think was supposed to be at some point, that that Yandhi leak is better than what the album we got now. Much better than the album we got. Songs that were on that album that are on this album. Like I think the one with Ty Dolla $ign, Everything We Need, I think is what it's called. Or let me see what it's called. Kanye, Ty Dolla $ign, Jesus is King. Gosh, yeah, I need to look because it's been a little bit of a while. I've had my thoughts simmering on this album. Yep, Everything We Need. That version of that song on, Yandhi was much better, I thought. And there's songs on Yandhi that were supposed to be on this that were much better, like New Body and things like that. But yeah, I thought this, and also gospel album. Gospel has been done for years and years, and maybe Kanye is popularizing it, you could say that, but I don't know, man. I thought this album was very, very weak. Very weak outing from Kanye. And probably his worst album, in my opinion. I think this is his worst album. So I'm going to go ahead and give this thing a 5 out of 10. Very, very disappointing. And I hope Kanye changes trajectory moving forward, but I don't know. He Kanye very rarely settles on one sound for a long time, but he has a family now, and I'm very curious to see where he goes from here. So there you go, guys. That is episode 9 of the Alias podcast. I know it's been a while, but I think moving forward, we're going to probably have a few more episodes this month. I'm going to have finals, and I'm going to be going on vacation. So that's going to cause some issues, but I do want to talk about Star Wars. Just have a big discussion about Star Wars once episode 9 comes out and the whole saga is complete. Maybe talk about the Mandalorian some more, and then maybe also talk about this entire decade as a whole, because there's been a lot of good stuff that's come out. So, all right, everyone. Take care and have a nice day.